You know, I like things a little bit hot and spicy. Just ask your mum. But instead of getting hot and heavy out on the town with her, I'll be attempting to keep the RTX 4090 and i9 14900K under control. There's 800 watts of power coming from just these two components alone, so I've brought in the big guns, the LANCOOL 216. Is it up to the task? Let's find out. Roll the tape.
I feel it on my skin today. All the things I try to wash away, they've been waiting for my walls to thin. I feel it on my skin. And now the ghosts are flooding in, trying to drown me in my former sins. Let the panic in my lungs begin. I feel it on my skin. A shiver and a shake may take me, but I will still return. The memories that haunt me, shape me, a product of the burn. When I'm underneath the surface, I can shut my eyes and focus so I can see. Underwater, hear the rumbling of my former ego mumbling. Can you hear that too? Or maybe it's just me. A shiver and a shake may take me, but I'll still return. The memories that haunt me, shape me, a product of the burn. And I'll drink it all. A shiver and a shake may take me, but I will still return. The memories that haunt me, shape me, a product of it
I've been an avid fan of the LANCOOL 215 for ages due to its decent value and chart-topping cooling performance, so I thought for an i9 14900K and 4090 build, I'm going to be needing that kind of cooling performance. Since then, the LANCOOL 216 has come out, but does it have the cooling chops to tame the fireball created by the 14900K and 4090? I'm pleased to report that the cooling performance was, in a word, stellar. Now wait, yes, before you say 100 degrees, which did come up, yes, but that was in Prime 95, and that's on a CPU pulling over 300 watts, which is just nuts. It's just gonna happen, unless you delid, undervolt, and do all kinds of other trickery. But as you can see, in games, our temperature was actually very reasonable, usually hanging around between 65 and 70 most of the time, which for me, that is plenty cool. I think it's a combination of plenty of airflow coming in through the case, and this Deepcool LS720 doing absolute bits. I did rub the stock thermal paste off and replaced it with Arctic MX5, and that probably helped a bit. I do find the stock thermal paste on the more budget coolers isn't usually up to snuff. There's also an LGA 1700 contact frame on there which might have contributed a couple of degrees, but that's usually really minor. And surprisingly, the system is shockingly quiet. On desktop tasks, I can't hear it at all. And in games, it's basically inaudible through open back headphones. So when I'm talking about open back headphones, guys, I'm not talking about a clamp on gaming headset or in-ear earphones. I'm talking about an open back sort of studio recording thing, right? Not classic gamer ear cups. So this is actually designed to let sound through, and I could barely hear it then. So in terms of noise, I'm calling this a win, and there was basically no coil whine in the PC at all. You know, you can never completely get rid of coil whine, but this was really, really, really quiet in that regard. So talking about the graphics card, I think the Gigabyte Gaming OC is one of the best all-round RTX 4090s, and I'll tell you why. So it looks decent, it's got a nice sort of black design, but really where this shines is the outstanding cooling. Temperatures are always really low on these throughout the stack, so you go from 4060 all the way up to 4090, the cooling is going to be excellent. The Gigabyte Gaming OCs also tend to have basically zero coil whine, which is absolutely brilliant. I hate coil whine, but that said, the 40 series doesn't tend to have much coil whine anyway. Radeons do have a little bit more in my experience, but as time's gone on, they must just be using better materials because I don't hear the coil whine in newer GPUs quite as much. You know, we don't talk about coil whine very much. Would you like a full video on that? Tell me in the description. But back to the card. The Gigabyte Gaming OC comes with an excellent anti-sag system included for free in the box, which mounts to your motherboard. You'll find that the price of the Gigabyte Gaming OC is pretty reasonable. Reasonable, I mean, this is 4090s, guys, but reasonable in the market of 4090s. It's usually only a little bit more than the basic models, and you do get much better build quality. Like I always say, if you buy the cheapest of the cheap 4090s, it's still going to be absolutely fine. So just get whatever works for your budget and requirements. Otherwise, though, I was really impressed with the style and performance of the LS720 Deepcool AIO. I think the build came together really nicely as well. I didn't want to go overboard with like Strimer cables, you know, you want to get a bit of RGB in, but I didn't go absolutely mental with it. You know, I bought too many of these Strimer cables. I bought one set for a build and then ordered a second set by accident or something to do with the shipping. And I had these here and I didn't use them, but that was deliberate because I didn't want to go overboard with the RGB here. Now, the cost to build this system was an eye-watering £3,300. I got a couple of parts on sort of a light discount, but it's still a hefty sum to pay. And of course, it won't be quite this much if you go for something like a Corsair RM1000E power supply. I just used this Asus Thor Platinum because I've had it for ages and it needed to be used. I think I must have bought it for my own PC at some point and then just never ended up needing it. So it's just been sat there and I thought, if there's going to be a build that I'm going to use a Platinum power supply for, it's going to be this one. Now you can pick up this whole build at PC36.co.uk if you live in the UK. If you fancy it, please. My accountant would thank you, but the only real way to squeeze more performance from this PC would be to put higher speed RAM on and then do some overclocking, undervolting, all that kind of stuff. Those are all great things to do, but they're going to make the system less stable. And as someone that's going to sell PCs for a living, it just has to be stable, really, even if that comes at the cost of a few extra percentage points on performance. But you're probably here for the LANCOOL 216 review, aren't you? So let's get into that right now. One of the things I loved about the LANCOOL 215 was the perforated front panel and enormous 200mm fans. I don't know what I'm doing with my hands there. I'm glad they've carried that over in the 216, though the fans have been scaled back a bit. They're now 160mm instead of 200. That's still quite a bit bigger, and I think we're going to be fine. They are ARGB ring fans, but you can buy a non-RGB version if you prefer a stealthier look. And while we're on cooling, one of my frustrations with the 215 was that you couldn't top mount a 360mm liquid cooler, but thankfully you can now do that in the 216, which brings it into the upper echelon of cases suitable for high-end gaming and productivity. For me, it's not really a very good high-end case unless you can get a 360mm in the top. You can put a 120 or 140mm fan on the back, and I'm a bit disappointed that as standard this fan is plain instead of ARGB, because basically if I'm going to put an RGB build together I'm going to be replacing that back fan for RGB anyway. The PSU shroud is mesh, which I could take or leave. I'd say it kind of fits with the overall look and feel of this case, so I'm all for it. You can put two 120mm or 140mm fans on the top of it if you want for a bit of extra airflow into your GPU, but I'd say there's not really any point, especially with how well built the 4090s are nowadays. The motherboard tray supports ATX, MATX and ITX motherboards, and you can probably get eATX in there as well. And there's plenty of cutouts for all of your cables. The PCIe slot covers are fully removable, so vertical mounting is easy in this case, and they've definitely thought about vertical mounting here because the whole PCIe slot cover piece can be rotated round, which means that you don't need some elaborate system. All you need is a riser cable and 2 standoffs, and it makes it much easier than buying a whole expensive system. The front I/O as standard comes on the top, but you can actually take this whole piece off and move it down to the side of the case if that's something that you prefer. And I think that's a pretty nice feature because having cables like flinging over the front of your PC does kind of ruin the aesthetic, so it's a nice thought. In terms of what's on the I/O, you get USB 3, USB-C, you get a combined sort of headphone mic jack, headset jack, you get reset /RGB button depending on how you hook it up, and you get a power button. The rear cable management chamber is simple and effective, and I've come to expect this from Lian-Li. That's why I'm a big fan of their cases. There's just a big, large channel in the middle for your cables with some Velcro straps, and that's really all you need. They've also put in some clamps on the right-hand side, which is to hold your CPU power cable in place. I found that to be a neat feature, though actually in this build the CPU power cables from the power supply were a bit shorter than normal, so I couldn't use them all, but I think that's more to do with this power supply than the case. A really cool feature that deserves a mention are these little hatches on the top of the case, and this is brilliant. These allow you to easily route liquid cooler fan cables through without shredding your fingers up trying to feed your fingers through. It's one of those features that I never knew that I wanted, but now that I've seen it on this case, it's such a good quality of life investment. You can see from the footage I'm showing you on screen that when you put the liquid cooler up there, sometimes those fan cables are quite short. You want to try and pull them through, and having that hatch there does allow you to pull them through a lot easier. So kudos to Lian-Li. We've got a drive cage which can hold 2 3.5-inch drives and 2 2.5-inch drives simultaneously. There's also 2 2.5-inch sleds on the right-hand side of the cable management space. And if you still need more mounting points because you're mental, you can put 2 2.5-inch drives on top of the PSU shroud. So not even the most jaded of Reddit users can complain about the lack of storage in this case. You're definitely covered. At the top, you'll notice an ARGB and PWM hub, which terminates in a PWM and ARGB cable, and you can hook those up to your motherboard. And you need to use a SATA power cable to power this hub. Now this is a really neat feature, and it shows that Lian-Li are thinking about the kind of builds that people are going to be doing in this case. Connections that they have available there are more than what comes with the case as standard, so it means that you can hook up all your RGB stuff to this hub. Then just below this PWM hub is a vanity plate. If someone could tell me what this is actually for, that'd be great, but you can take it off if you're one of those weirdos that puts the back plate on with the motherboard already in the case. You know, because most people are going to put the back plate on the motherboard and then put the motherboard into the case. It makes much more sense. I suppose that might be useful if you're doing an in-place upgrade of your cooling, so who am I to judge? That concludes our case tour, but what did I think about the case? You know, I started this review thinking the LANCOOL 216 would just be a good case all round, but sort of what you expect and nothing to write home about. But boy, was I wrong. They've basically thought of everything. They've put it into a somewhat affordable package, made it look sweet, and on top of that have used high quality materials. I'm absolutely gushing over here. It's got to be one of the best no-brainer cases out there, which will just work. Air cooling, liquid cooling, whatever. I'm clutching at straws here, but the only drawback is really that rear fan isn't ARGB as standard. So I paid £110 for this case, and that's including all the taxes, but I imagine it's probably the same when you go into dollars. And you do get a nice case for that, but it is quite expensive. £110 on a case is a lot. It's not a lot in the context of this build because it's an expensive build, but if you're building more of a mid-range, lower mid-range, you know, most people are in that £600 to £1,200 range, and this might actually be a bit too expensive for buyers in that range. But what you will get is a very high quality case, and if that's worth paying in your eyes, then you're not going to be disappointed. I'm not in a position to run any scientific tests or dial in exact cooling numbers. You know, there's plenty of other channels that are going to do that better than me. I simply don't have the time or resources. But chances are, you're just here to see other people's view on the components and cases, that kind of thing. And you're trying to see what I thought. And this is exactly what you're getting in this video, and it's a big recommend from me. So, to answer the question posed in the video title, is this the best case for the 4090 and 4900K? Yes, it's one of them, because there's so many different ways that you can make this combination work, but we've definitely proven today that this case is capable of doing it. Now, if you agree with what I've said in this video, tell me in the comments. Maybe you'd prefer a Ryzen-based system instead of this 4900K. So why not check out this video showing off a similar spec build but with a Ryzen and all in white, and that's linked on screen. Until then, I'll catch you.